A Simplex converted to a Great Western Railway Prairie tank. This is part 58, refitting the wheels and coupling rods. And it sounds like a simple job, which sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. The job begins by applying some oil to the horn blocks. This is the normal lubricating oil that I buy from a company called Hallett Oils. I need to figure out which way round the wheels fit. I should have marked them when I removed them so they would fit back in exactly the same place, but I prefer to do it this way because it's more exciting. And I could certainly do with a bit of excitement in my life, that's for sure. As a general rule, if you fit two parts back together that have holes for bolts, and the holes are in line, then there's a good chance that that's the correct way to do it. I think I'll go with this because it looks okay. I'm applying some oil to all the moving parts. This is very important. The horn keeps are held to the horn blocks using 2BA bolts, quite short 2BA bolts. I'm tightening these 2BA bolts into the horn blocks using a screwdriver-shaped socket driver. It's fairly important not to shear these bolts off, by the way, so when you're doing this job, put enough pressure on the socket driver just to tighten them up. Do not torque them up like you would on a car engine. A good indication that I've got the centre wheel set the correct way round, all the holes in the horn keeps lined up perfectly with the holes in the horn blocks. All the bolts were easily fitted with my fingers. Moving towards the rear of the engine, it's time to do exactly the same with the rear set of wheels, starting off as previously shown by some lubrication of the horn blocks. Because this engine has been degreased in my parts washer and also steam cleaned, the bearings will be very dry. So before I test run the engine when it's finally back together using compressed air, I will be re-oiling these parts one more time. Even though this is not a new engine and the parts aren't particularly tight, it's been disturbed, so the parts will all need to sort of bed back in, and it's a good idea to use a lot of oil for this job. In this clip, I'm giving the wheels a spin just to make sure that they spin freely, and they do. 2 down and 1 to go. This is the front wheel set, the one with the eccentric on it that drives the water pump. So not only am I lubricating the axle boxes, I'm also pumping some lubricating oil around the eccentric strap. By pumping some oil into the axle boxes, this tells me that the hole through to the bearing is not blocked up, which can often be the case on miniature coal-fired steam locomotives. Here's the front axle set in place. It's now time to fit the coupling rods. And these will only fit one way round. The coupling rod fits perfectly on the rear wheel's crank pin and on the centre crank pin, but to fit the coupling rod to the crank pin on the front wheel, you need to lift the front axle set. That's because the crosshead is in the way. When the coupling rods are fitted to one side only, it's quite difficult to smoothly rotate the wheels. I realised that I didn't need to move the rear set of wheels, so now I can actually bolt them in position. I'm sorry to do it in such a long-winded manner. As a general rule, fit the coupling rods before you tighten any of the bolts on the horn keeps, as it makes the job easier. Either way, it's only really possible to fit the coupling rods with the front wheel set fully loose. You may be thinking, why am I calling a single coupling rod coupling rods? Well, they're not single coupling rods. If you look, there's an articulated joint in the middle of them. So even though it looks like this engine has a pair of coupling rods, it's really got 4. To allow me to lift the centre set of wheels, I took the bolts out temporarily, and here I'm giving it a test rotation. During the rotation of the wheels by hand, I'm feeling whether there are any tight spots at any part of the rotation. And the good news is no, everything's running very freely. There is, however, a discrepancy in the quartering of the wheels. It may not be that. It could be that the axle boxes are out of line at one side. It could be a lot of things. Let me explain about wheel quartering. On a steam locomotive, the crank pins need to be a perfect 90 degrees to each other at each side. And if they are not, you will get a tight spot. Quartering locomotive wheels is not as easy as it sounds. Normally, I would quarter wheels in my lathe using a couple of set squares. But it really is a good idea to make a jig so that you get every one of them the same. During manufacture of a pair of locomotive frames with axle boxes, it is vital that they are perfectly in line with each other. If I was building a locomotive from scratch, and I don't mean one that's been laser cut, I'm talking hacksaw and file style, the absolute first job would be to bolt both of the frames together and treat them as one unit. And that way each axle box slot will be perfectly in line with the one opposite. Similarly, every hole in the frames that's common to both frames would be drilled while the frames are still bolted together. The coupling rods are held to the rear wheel's crank pins using a large nut. And in this clip one more time I'm showing how important it is to apply plenty of oil. I would like to show you something quite important and very common. At the moment I'm fitting the front retainer for the coupling rod, and as you can see the washer isn't in the centre, so there is something wrong. The phosphor bronze bush in the coupling rod is actually oval, and because there is some clearance the wheels do rotate freely. I've already mentioned how important it is to make the frames as a matched pair, but once you've done that you need to then fit the axle boxes, bolt the frames back together and mill the axle slots. On this engine the rear coupling rods have been silver soldered because I think originally they were made the wrong length. But after all that, if you watch the earlier episode when I was running the engine, it ran quite well anyway, which is the main thing. Sadly, this will never be a gold medal winner, but I don't much care about that. I'm hoping now that by watching this you're a bit wiser as to why often coupling rods cause the wheels to bind. And that's it for this episode. During the lockdown, please stay healthy and sane. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website and click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that you can find other videos that you may like to watch. And by using the playlists you can actually watch the videos back to back.